Within the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, very few characters inspire the hatred that Cersei Lannister inspires. And I think that's for good reason. I mean, between the twincest, the betrayal of Ned, the upkeep of Joffrey, and just the bad decisions that she makes as Queen Regent, there are very few characters that just leave a as bad of a taste in your mouth as Cersei. But you can't deny she is a very interesting character to read about, and in my opinion, she's the main character of A Feast for Crows. Or at the very least, she was the character I was most looking forward to reading when I got to book 4. So today I want to go into where she's going to be going in The Winds of Winter. Because in my personal opinion, I think that the show is going to end very differently for Cersei than the books. And so I just want to go, beat by beat and see where, in my opinion, of my predictions and everything, where Cersei Lannister, the Lioness of Castle Rock, is going to end. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a recap of her storyline in The Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, only because I think it's important to know where her story begins in The Winds of Winter. I'm not going to hit every little chapter beat in her storyline. I don't think it's really relative to what we're talking about. But for everybody that isn't familiar with the books, let's just kind of, get a baseline here. Book 4 is basically about her remilitarizing the Faith of the Seven, which eventually leads to her imprisonment by the same faith, and then later her walk of atonement. Now, her walk of atonement doesn't necessarily mean that she's free from the charges that the faith is charging her with, but it's more like she's being put in house arrest, and in order to get put on house arrest, she has to have this public shaming event, basically. And then her story kind of ends with her going and meeting Robert Strong, who is almost certainly the Mountain, and that's kind of where we leave her. The only other added tidbit that we have is in the epilogue of A Dance with Dragons when Kevon Lannister says something to the effect of, Cersei looks very, very meek, and he doesn't really know what she's planning, but he can tell she's planning something. And that's really the last that we got out of Cersei. Cersei is kind of our eyes on King's Landing, one of the more major areas on the map that we get to see, at least in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. And I think that trend is going to continue into the Winds of Winter because we really don't have anybody else in that general area that can provide a point of view. So I think we're going to stay in Cersei's point of view during the Winds of Winter. I almost think that's entirely inevitable at this point. So now that we have the baseline of what's going on with Cersei, I'm going to get more in detail of what I think is going to happen with her character in the Winds of Winter. So, like I said, her walk of atonement did not free her of her charges, but rather put her on house arrest and make her hold fast. So the Faith has said that she will have to stand trial in order for her to be cleared of her charges. I think it's pretty much consensus in the fandom that Cersei is going to demand a trial by combat. And that trial by combat is going to be her versus the Faith, and they're each going to name a champion. Now, there's another theory that goes into, is Loras really, injured, or is that something that the Tyrells are kind of orchestrating in order to get this to work out so that Cersei is dethroned or killed or whatever the case might be. And I'm not going to go into that theory too big right now, but I think for the sake of this conversation, I think that Cersei is going to name Robert Strong as her champion. It makes the most sense. Out of all the new Kingsguard, he is by far the most deadliest. He has been, apparently programmed by Qyburn to be loyal to Cersei and Cersei alone. He's basically undead anyway because, most people believe he's actually just the Mountain that Qyburn has kind of used his, science to, Frankenstein back to life. But more importantly, or as important, who is the Faith going to name as their champion in this trial by combat? I really think it's going to be Sandor Clegane, the Hound, Gregor, or the Mountain's brother. I'm a firm believer that the Gravedigger theory is very real. I think that the Hound was the person that Brienne saw digging the graves out on the Isles when she was looking for Sansa. It makes a lot of sense to me. I can honestly see that, Cersei names this big guy that doesn't have any possibility of losing, so the Faith matches that by saying, okay, we got a big guy too. And I honestly think that this is where we're going to get Clegane Bowl, which Clegane Bowl is the meme in the fandom where Sandor versus Gregor, these two behemoths, these two brothers who have had it out for each other since book 1, are going to clash swords and it's all going to come to a head. There are other reasons why I think that, Gregor at the very least is going to be named the champion. For one, he wears a lot of these, jewels that are kind of bastardizes of the, the faith of the seven, etc. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be the Clegane Bowl that is the big driving factor. Can't you just imagine that you get that Cersei chapter where, they're walking down to, maybe it's, Maegor's Holdfast, or maybe they're going down to the Sept of Baelor, wherever they're holding the trial by combat, maybe the Dragon Pit, who knows. And, Cersei's just confident that there's no one that can beat Robert Strong, her champion, and then out walks the Hound who hasn't been seen in King's Landing since the Clash of Kings, the Hound who's been, repurposed with this new life, this new vision of how he's going to be. And he just sees his brother, and they just hate each other, and he's ready to kill. And I think that's going to be amazing, that jaw-dropping moment. And furthermore, I really do think that if that does happen, the Hound is going to win. I think in some way, shape, or form that, the faith is going to see either just a flat out win, the Hound kills Robert Strong, and then that is what it is. Cersei is then condemned to death, or at least imprisonment by the faith. And then, or the other hand, somewhere throughout the fight, his helmet, Robert Strong's helmet, comes off, and we see that, it's not actually Robert Strong, it's not anybody, it's, the, Frankenstein monster that, Qyburn has created, and the faith is going to see that as an abomination, affront to their religion, and that's just going to be enough reason right then and there for them to, execute Cersei. So at the end of the day, I think, and then I also think that's how, this is later on theories, but I think that's how the Hound comes back in the story. He might decide, after his decision to, come back into the fold, so to speak, he might go back to the Quiet Isle, or he might go up north and run into Sansa, or on his way back up to the Quiet Isle, he might run into Arya, who's coming back from Bravo. There's a whole number of ways that this can go, but I really do think that's how it is going to go. So after the trial by combat, Cersei is put to death. And we know from Tyrion's storyline that you're not immediately executed necessarily. And I think that's going to be the case for Cersei too. And I think that's when they're going to get to what happened in the show, and with the epic opening of season 6, episode 9, The Winds of Winter, of how she gets her revenge. And I think the only reason I really think that is because I know there's a lot of people that in the show, like, oh, the show sucks, the show didn't do this right, the show didn't do that right, there's no way that this character would do that, this goes against, common sense. But there's something about the way that the opening of season 6, episode 9 just kind of works, that I can't really imagine that not being something that George told the showrunners was going to happen. It fit too good. It was such a good moment that I don't see that not being a thing in the books. So I honestly do think that is that's what's going to happen, is about, maybe halfway to 3/4 of the way through the Winds of Winter, Cersei is going to blow up the Sept of Baelor. She is going to kill, all of her enemies in the faith and the Tyrells. Marjorie is going to die. Mace is potentially going to die. Loras is potentially going to die. The faith is certainly going to die. And I think that's how she's going to, name herself, queen, queen in all title. Because I do think that Tommen is going to die at some point in the Winds of Winter also. Maybe from suicide. I doubt it. He's kind of young for that, but maybe he's there with Marjorie in the Sept when everything goes off, and it's just something that Cersei couldn't have prevented, and that's how he dies, possibly, and that could be very ironic and sad for Cersei, kind of bittersweet. Maybe that's how he goes out. I don't know. Tommen's going to die, and with Tommen's death, I truly believe that Cersei will, sit on the Iron Throne, and that's how she will take over the city, take over the realm. And that sounds, great and everything, until you realize that FAegon is right around the corner. And I really do think that Cersei is going to die in the Winds of Winter. And I know what you're thinking, especially if you're a show only, or you're a show purist, or you believe the show has a little bit more impact, that, that doesn't make any sense. Cersei lasted to the very end. She lasted till after the Long Night. And that's true. But I think that has more to do with the fact that the audience from the show liked the character Cersei so much, it would have been dumb to kill her off before season 8. I think that it just came down to that the audience liked her, so they kept her around. I don't see Cersei being a final in-game boss for A Song of Ice and Fire. I really don't. I think her story is going to end in The Winds of Winter. So how does that happen? Well, in my personal opinion, what's going to happen is she's going to take over the throne. Maybe this is halfway through The Winds of Winter, maybe 3/4 of the way through The Winds of Winter. The Winds of Winter is going to be a big book, so take that as a grain of salt. But I think that's when FAegon is going to invade King's Landing. We already know that he's touched down in Westeros and trying to take over the Stormlands, and the Stormlands are not far from King's Landing at all. So I really think that it's possible that while all this is going on with, the trial by combat and basically the terrorist attack that Cersei, commits against the faith, while all that's going on, that the second son, not the second sons, I'm sorry, the Golden Company and FAegon and John Con, they are marching on King's Landing about the same time. And not only that, you also have to realize that Arianne from Dorne is also going to be sitting on the small council of probably Cersei at that point. And I really think what's going to happen is FAegon's going to come in with a diplomatic approach, and we all know Cersei. She's going to say, "Fuck no, you're not coming in and taking my power away from me." And so he just comes in with his entire army. Maybe it's similar to when Tywin took over the city, and everyone thought he was coming to liberate them, when in reality, they opened the gates and they sacked it. Maybe Arianne's gonna be the one that opens the gates and they sack the city. The only reason I say this, I think Arianne and FAegon are gonna be king and queen, at least for a little while, in King's Landing. And I think that might be where Cersei dies. I really do. Now the problem with that is the Valonqar prophecy, because everyone kind of is in agreement that no matter what happens, Cersei has to die by either Tyrion or Jaime's hand. And I'm a bigger fan of it being Jaime's hand. But on the other hand, this possibly could go the other way. And let me explain. So let's just say, for example, FAegon comes into the city. And the only reason I'm putting this in, I'll get into why this order of events makes a little bit more sense to me in a little bit. So FAegon comes into the city, right? And he takes over. But he doesn't necessarily kill Cersei. Maybe he says that Cersei's a powerful political piece to keep the Westerlands in check. Maybe she just gets away. She's hiding somewhere in the Red Keep. The Red Keep has a lot of tunnel systems. Maybe she's in the dark cells. Who knows? But let's say that she's still alive during FAegon's reign, and I think that Arianne's going to be joining him as his queen. So, but then Dany shows up. Daenerys Targaryen lands on the shores, and I've always thought that Dany is going to show up to King's Landing and see, FAegon on the throne. And the reason I think that is in the House of the Undying chapter, she sees the Mummer's dragon and everyone, applauding it. Here's what I think would make a lot more sense thematically. So all these things I said before about the trial by combat, all that stuff, yeah, great. So that still happens. But what happens now is Dany shows up to King's Landing and sees FAegon, and she gets pissed off. And I think what happens is Tyrion is the one that at the end of the day tells Dany, burn this city to the ground. We already know that Tyrion hates King's Landing. He wants to see it burn. He hates every person in that city. He wants them dead. So as Dany's key advisor, he advises her to burn down the city, and so she does. And I also really think that Jaime will be in the city at the same time. The reason being, I really do think that when Cersei, takes the throne, that Jaime comes back to the city, or at least is on his way back to the city, and trying to talk to her, trying to make sure she does become a mad queen. There's like Aerys did that he had to take care of back in the day. So what I think is, I'm kind of rambling, but let me explain what I think is going to happen. I think that Jaime is going to find Cersei, and at that same time, Dany is going to burn down King's Landing. And I think that Cersei might have some kind of plan to take back the throne from FAegon. That plan is to burn down King's Landing. The irony being, it's about to burn down anyway. And Jaime, being the person that saved the city once from a mad king, has to save it from a mad queen, and he kills her by choking the life out of her, just like in the Valonqar prophecy. Meanwhile, Tyrion is convincing Dany to burn down the city, and then the rubble of all that crushes Cersei and Jaime, and that's how they both die. So, in my opinion, the Valonqar was both Jaime and Tyrion in one way or the other. She died by a little brother's hand. So, I think that's how Cersei's story is going to go. I don't think that this is going to be necessarily a very popular theory because a lot of people like Cersei. At least they liked her in the show. A lot of people want to see her go up into a Gem of Spring. I just don't see that happening. I just think the symbolism of the Clegane Bowl, the Winds of Winter being too good, that the showrunners almost definitely had some help from George on that one. I think that, the Winds of I think that Jaime being the one to kill Cersei, but also Tyrion being the one that burns down King's Landing, so they both die. She dies by both brothers in a symbolic way. I think that FAegon taking over the city. I think that all makes 100% sense to me. And I know I rambled a lot about this, and this is by far not my most thought out video. But yeah, please let me know what you guys think down below. This is something that I'm kind of doing off the cuff. But yeah, I really, really like this process of events. So yeah, I'm gonna start putting out videos a lot more often. Please subscribe and like. Talk to you later. Bye.